Hello everyone, welcome back to another wacky Dingus YouTube classic. Today's video will be pretty different to the type of content I usually do, since instead of regurgitating from a script, I'm kind of going in raw, so to speak. I'm also doing something slightly more original, since rather than doing what most other channels have done and rank a discography by album or do a top 10 or something like that, I'll be ranking every single individual song from, you guessed it, Steely Dan. If you don't know what a Steely Dan is a jazz rock band formed in 1971 by keyboardist and vocalist Donald Fagen and guitarist and bassist Walter Becker, being known for such hits as Do It Again, Dirty Work, Reelin' in the Years, and plenty of others. Steely Dan is definitely something that's kind of personal to me, since it's one of the things that really got me where I am today, both on YouTube and as a person, and I feel like I've listened to their music enough to give a totally and completely fair, unbiased, and definitive ranking of pretty much all of their songs. Now, before I get started here, I want to clarify a few things. First off, I am not a music critic. All of the takes presented in this video are from the perspective of an average or possibly even below average listener, so keep that in mind, especially when it seems like I don't know what I'm talking about. Second, I'll only be ranking Fagen and Becker's major collaborative efforts that have been officially released and completed to some capacity, from You Gotta Walk It to Everything Must Go. Unfortunately, that means no demos and outtakes, live stuff besides a few exceptions, solo stuff, or songs that were written by Fagen and Becker but weren't recorded by them. Maybe I'll talk about them in separate videos, but that's something for another time. I mean, this video is already so long considering that I have something to say about each of the nearly 100 songs I'll be covering, and adding more to that list would probably make it more of a slog to watch through than it already is. Finally, I want to make it clear that I don't necessarily hate any Steely Dan song. They're all perfect in their own little ways, but some just so happen to be more perfect than others. With all that out of the way, let's just get right into it. So here we are on Tier Maker. I figured that the easiest way to organize this ranking would be to make it a tier list, and it would probably be more visually interesting than having my little cartoon blob guy stand in the corner for however long this might take. As you can see, I'm following the standard S through D tier format, but for reference, D tier, while it is the worst, isn't necessarily bad considering I don't think there's any bad Steely Dan song. So consider it the mid tier. Of course, S tier is the top tier. It's the gifts from God, the cream of the crop, the best of the best, while B, the mid tier, is the middle ground between the two, so by my standard it would be great. Also, some of my placements may seem kind of strange at first, but keep in mind this is a very fluid ranking, and I will be making adjustments later on. Now, we're starting off not so strong with You Gotta Walk It Like You Talk It or You'll Lose That Beat, which was a soundtrack made by Fagen and Becker for a movie of the same name in 1971. Now, this is definitely an album. It's not good. It's not terrible, it's just You Gotta Walk It, definitely not Fagen and Becker's finest work. There are a few pretty good songs on here, but for the most part it can only really be enjoyed ironically, considering how much of a joke it's become within smaller Steely Dan circles, or at least the ones I'm part of. First up, the title track. This song is very representative of this album as a whole, in that, like the album itself, it's very mediocre and can only really be enjoyed ironically. I understand that this song was made for a comedy film, and it's supposed to be funny and goofy, but I can't help but feel it's like that for the wrong reason. The reason being, it's a mediocre Steely Dan song made for a soundtrack of a now lost B-movie. I have to give credit where credit is due though, since the song has pretty nice solos, and Marty Coopersmith's lead vocals really make this song what it is. A little goofy fun song. So, for that, I think I'm gonna put it in the C tier. Flotsam and Jetsam. It's a neat little instrumental piece. I like the talkbox guitar on this one. I mean, it probably could have had an interesting place in the film, but how should I know? Or anyone for that matter. Definitely one of the better cuts off of this album, but still not much of note. For now, I'll put it in the B tier, but it'll be moved later. Up next is War and Peace. It's a very interesting instrumental piece. I think that it only really works as part of Flotsam and Jetsam, but I'm counting it as a separate song because that's how it is on the track list. Anyway, I think this one is kind of a stinker. It might have had a bigger purpose in the film, but with the context it has right now, it's just a bunch of garbage. Nonsense drumming and Donald Fagen banging on the piano keys. It just isn't very good. War and Peace is unfortunately our first bottom tier. Roll Back the Meaning. This song is pretty good. It's a nice little feel-good song. Kenny Vance's vocals are quite nice on this one. I like the mixing on this song with the lead guitar in the left channel and the acoustic guitar and the organ on the right. It makes for a nice listening experience. I also really like the line, "The time is right but something else is wrong," which they sing twice. Overall, it's a pretty nice song. Not really much else to say about it though, so it's going in the mid-tier. I'd say it's better than Flotsam and Jetsam. You Gotta Walk It Like You Talk It, Reprise.
Oh wait, one more tomato before the gynecologist's office.
Alright, on to the next song, Dog Eat Dog. This is the one song off of You Gotta Walk It that has Donald Fagen doing the lead vocals, and I gotta say, it's pretty good. Sound-wise, it's a very fun and energetic song, especially with the lead guitar and piano work. Lyrically, it's your typical Steely Dan society kinda sucks and is a mess type fare. The whole thing kinda plays out like a proto-Steely Dan song, and that's what I appreciate about it, since it's a good example of what's yet to come. Also, I think that Donald screaming at the end is pretty funny, so we're putting this at the top of the mid-tier. Definitely my favorite off of this album. Red Giant White Dwarf. This song is basically an 8-minute guitar solo. Denny Dias is a phenomenal player on all of his parts in every Steely Dan song he's played on, and this one is no exception. It's just such beautiful work here. Combine that with the piano and the organ, and you've got yourself a really unique and relaxing experience. However, I think that it drags on for way too long. Besides the guitar and the little keyboard added near the end, it doesn't really go anywhere. So for that, it's going in one of the lower tiers. If It Rains. The song is very unique in that it's the only ballad in the entire Steely Dan catalog, excluding Maxine. What sets it apart from other ballads of the time is its weird and cryptic lyrics, but musically, it's not all that great since it reuses the same chord progression throughout most of the song, and when new elements are added, specifically the drums, they're way too heavy on the reverb. It also suffers the same problem as Red Giant White Dwarf in that it just drags on for way too long. As much as I hate to put it there, it's going in the bottom tier. Heading into the 1972 singles, they're definitely a step up from You Gotta Walk It, but unfortunately, there's still a lot to be desired from these songs. I mean, it could be expected considering that these songs were probably meant for other artists. Denny Doherty covered Sail the Waterway sometime in 1971, and Dallas was eventually covered in 1975 by Poco. The songs are also notoriously disliked by Fagen and Becker, with the last time they were officially released being on a self-titled Japanese EP in 1978. First, we'll be looking at Dallas, which is very strange as it's a country/folk rock type song. Drummer Jim Hodder takes the lead vocals on this one, and I gotta say, it works kind of well for what they were trying to do here. His singing voice almost has this sort of southern drawl to it, which is really weird because he's from Long Island, but it fits well with the sort of country theme they were going for. I mean, it's not a terrible song by any means, but it's just really jarring to have this country song come out of Steely Dan, a band known for their super slick and clean jazz rock. So I think I'm gonna put this one in the C tier. I mean, it's pretty good, better than most of You Gotta Walk It, but yeah, it's Dallas. Sail the Waterway. Like Dallas, it's very rooted in country and folk rock, and again is a far cry from what you'd expect from Steely Dan. Lyric-wise, it kinda gives off Any World vibes, since it's partly about wanting to escape the monotony of a 9 to 5 by sailing the waterway. Other than that, I think it's fine. Pretty fantastic guitar solo, nice hook. Fagen does the vocals here, and I don't think they fit the song as well as Hodder's fit Dallas, but it's still fine. It's not a terrible song. So I think that I'm gonna put this one like right below Dallas. Now we're getting into the real albums, starting with the Dan's first, Can't Buy a Thrill, which was released in 1972. Can't Buy a Thrill definitely screams first album to me, considering that it really feels like the band is just trying to find their footing with this one. While it seems quite commercial on its surface, since it really leans towards classic rock and pop, there's still those classic Steely Dan jazz, blues, and R&B inflections, as well as a few Latin influences, specifically with the songs Do It Again and Only a Fool Would Say That, and also a bit of country influence with the use of the pedal steel guitar. And while it's not my favorite, it's still a very solid album. Starting with Do It Again, it's a very classic Steely Dan tune, and it's very hard to get more Steely Dan than this, even though it's not their best song. What I love about this song is its super psychedelic sound, which is a result of its brilliant chord progression and the really good instrument choice, especially shown by the crazy sitar solo by Denny Dias and the organ solo that follows. Do It Again also works as a great example of Steely Dan's subversion from the mainstream pop at the time, considering its darker subject matter, which is the cycle of sin that drives men to do what they do. The one bad thing I have to say about it is that it feels really long, even though it's only 6 minutes, but I still love Do It Again. It's a classic. This one is going in the A tier. I wish I could say the same about Dirty Work. In my opinion, Dirty Work is not only one of the worst Steely Dan songs, but possibly the most overrated out of all of them. I mean, they put it in the show for Italians. They put it in the show for mentally ill teenagers. You'd think that if they were to put it in all sorts of media, it'd be one of their best, but it's really not. So what do I think is good about Dirty Work? Like with pretty much every other Steely Dan song, Dirty Work's instrumentation is on point. This song has the distinction of being the first Steely Dan song with a proper horn arrangement, and I gotta say, it kinda deserves it. Especially with the sax solo, it's great. But the one thing that kinda sets me off is the organ. Especially the intro, just something is off about it. Now to talk about the elephant in the room, David Palmer, who does the lead vocals on this song and Brooklyn Knows the Charmer Under Me. Now, I don't hate David Palmer's vocals. I think they're quite nice, especially in a soft rock or pop type setting, which is what Dirty Work kinda is. But at the same time, the lyrics themselves don't really fit that. I guess it's in typical Steely Dan fashion to have this sort of facade of a really clean, soft, smooth pop instrumental with really debaucherous lyrics, but I don't know, something is just really off here. I think that this dynamic between the lyrics and the instrumental is just way too subtle, and the whole thing ends up coming off as a generic, overly commercial pop song with incredibly jarring lyrics. It's just a strange experience. So yeah, it's going in the D tier, where it belongs. Up next is Kings. Kings is a pretty cool, chill sort of song. There's a lot going on with the instrumental, especially with the guitars. There's a lot of guitars in the song. It has a really nice Elliot Randall guitar solo. The subtle bongo playing during the chorus is also a pretty nice touch. And it's one of those Steely Dan songs where it's very cryptic and subtle with its lyrics, which I assume are a political allegory for United States presidents. And it even has no political significance written about it in the liner notes, which is just, it says a lot. Overall, it's just a very nice song to chill to. Really good cut off of Can't Buy a Thrill. Midnight Cruiser. This is probably one of the most underrated Steely Dan songs. Midnight Cruiser establishes the recurring character type of the gentleman loser perfectly. And while the song might have fit better with Fagen's vocals, Jim Hodder is a very good singer and he fits the song quite well. I assume that Hodder's vocals are the main turnoff for people when it comes to Midnight Cruiser, but anyway. Instrumental-wise, this song screams classic rock, and it's mixed pretty subtly, especially with the subtle guitar laid underneath the piano. The whole thing just kind of gives off night driving vibes, which is really accurate to the title of the song. The only bad thing I can say about Midnight Cruiser is that it doesn't really feel like a Steely Dan song, which could be a turnoff for some, but not me, since I hate Steely Dan. Overall, Midnight Cruiser, incredible song. Only a Fool Would Say That. A lot of people say this is their favorite cut off this album, and while I don't agree, I do understand where this comes from. It's an incredible song. It's a nice little Latin-esque tune ragging on John Lennon's Imagine. Fagen's vocals fit on this song perfectly, since his snide and nasally voice matches the cynical worldview of the narrator very well. This makes for a really good contrast from the relaxing and very acoustic-based instrumental. It's very unique in a good way. Only a fool would say that in the A tier. Up next, Reelin' in the Years. This is another Steely Dan song. It's definitely one of the songs they're known for, and I do like this song, alright? It's not Steely Dan's magnum opus, nor is it the worst song ever written. It's Reelin' in the Years, and I like it. Instrumentally, this song is amazing. You got these crazy jazzy piano chords which clash directly with the classic rock type lead guitar, but they harmonize so beautifully to create this sort of classic rock jazz that Reelin' in the Years is known for. And it goes without saying that Elliot Randall does a fantastic job with the lead guitar on the song, especially with the solos. As for the lyrics, it portrays this pissed ex-boyfriend character, and he reminisces on the perceived flaws of his ex, which creates this sort of unreliable narrator that's present throughout a lot of Steely Dan songs, and is really well done here. The chorus, however, it gets a bit grating, considering it repeats twice, but overall, Reelin' in the Years is a great song, and it speaks for itself, but it's definitely one of those songs that is at its best when you've probably never heard it before.
Just because of that, I think I'll put it in the B tier for now, but I might move it later.
Fire in the Hole. This is definitely one of the best cuts off of Can't Buy a Thrill. The opening piano solo hits really hard, and the whole thing sounds kind of depressing, especially considering the lyrics are about a guy who's evading the draft and facing the mental and societal consequences as a result. Fire in the Hole also has one of the best keyboard solos in Steely Dan, which is the middle piano solo. Last thing I want to note is the use of the pedal steel guitar, which is really good since it sort of makes it sound like a sad country song almost. Overall, Fire in the Hole is a really good song. It's going in the A tier. Brooklyn Owes the Charmer Under Me. This song might as well be about nothing. I mean, I know that it's been stated before that this is about Fagin and Becker's downstairs neighbor, but most of the lyrics just mean absolutely nothing. Sound-wise, it's definitely more country sounding than the rest of the album, especially since the bulk of the song is made up of guitars, with the spotlight being on the pedal steel guitar. David Palmer, he fits this one more than Dirty Work, and you got the nice soul backing vocals. Really don't have much more to say about it. It's in the mid-tier. Change of the Guard. This is one of the lesser songs on Can't Buy a Thrill. Not necessarily because it's bad, but more because it's not super interesting. In typical Steely Dan fashion, it has these weird, cryptic lyrics, and it also has really nice lead guitar work by Jeff Skunk Baxter, but other than that, it sort of plays out like a generic classic rock song. It feels like something that they wrote for someone else, but they needed to fill the track list, so they went and recorded it anyway. As a whole, Change of Guard is pretty good, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not the best. So I'll put it in the C tier. Turn That Heartbeat Over Again. This song really works well as a closer, considering that it circles back to the theme of sin brought upon by Do It Again and expands on it with the willingness to repent. And it also does this in the music, considering that it closes with wind chimes, while Do It Again opens with wind chimes. Again, the instrumental is actually really nice. It's quite complex, especially with the percussion. I love the tambourine and the maracas. It's just so much fun. The mixing with the vocals in each channel is really unique, and I really like that. The one bad thing I have to say about Turn That Heartbeat Over Again is that the chorus is insanely drawn out. Like, more drawn out than Reelin' in the Years. It just feels super long, and like, that's how the song feels as a whole. It just feels really long, even though it's only 5 minutes long. As a whole, Turn That Heartbeat Over Again, it's alright. I don't hate this song. I'll put it at the top of the C tier. On to the next album, Countdown to Ecstasy. While admittedly, this is the one I listen to the least, I still think it's a lot better than the other two albums from this era. It's like Can't Buy a Thrill in that it's more in line with classic rock, but it's a lot more consistent and organized, and it has better songs. It also has a lot more jazz influences, which ironically isn't really shown in the first song, Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is yet another Steely Dan classic. It's definitely a one-of-a-kind song. It's very infectious and catchy, which is a result of the blues rock sort of sound that it has, and it definitely seems like a warm-up / live song, which is basically what it started out as because it was supposedly played during the Can't Buy a Thrill tour. But anyway, this song also has some of the craziest guitar solos in all of Steely Dan, which are done by both guitarists Denny Dias and Jeff Baxter. As for the lyrics, they're kind of stupid, but that's kind of the point, since they satirize the sort of Western romanticization of Eastern religion. It's really good and impressive as a whole.
So I'll put this in the A tier.
Is it better than Do It Again? I think so. Up next is Razor Boy. It's a very chill, relaxing song, and what really makes it like this is the Victor Feldman vibraphone playing. As for the lyrics, they don't make any sense, which is very Steely Dan-like, and it really adds to the contrast between the really weird lyrics and the very soothing instrumental. It's pretty neat overall. Razor Boy, really good song.
I'll put it at the top of B tier.
The Boston Rag. Boomin' intro. It gets you really excited and it subverts your expectations by getting kinda soft afterward, but it does this a lot with the riff at the end and the verses and the chorus. The whole song is kind of subversive and I really like that. Crazy solo done by Jeff Skunk Baxter. There's also really complex yet subtle mixing. I love the mixing on this song, especially with the really subtle acoustic guitar in the far left channel. It makes for a very nice auditory experience.
The lyrics are somewhat autobiographical in that they're loosely based on Fagen's college days, with the main focus being on Lonnie, who was Fagen's neighbor during his freshman year at Bard. I'm a real sucker for these kinds of lyrics, especially since I'm a Steely Dan lore wizard. And as a whole, the Boston Rag just makes for a fun, crowd pleaser type experience, so I'll put it in the A tier.
Your Gold Teeth. It's kind of like Razor Boy in that it has this sort of chill, relaxing sort of vibe, but it's really long and solo heavy. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't a bad song. I love Steely Dan's longer songs, but this one feels pretty repetitive, especially between the first and second bridges, but it makes up for it with the solos and the explosive outro. In terms of lyrics, it's definitely one of the most ambiguous and cryptic, like many of the great Steely Dan songs. I assume it's about gambling, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to tell, especially with lines like, "In the year of the locust, you'll see a sad thing," "Even Kathy Barbarian knows there's one roulade she can't sing," or even the line pulled straight from the Count Basie song Going to Chicago Blues, "There ain't nothing in Chicago for a monkey woman to do." It's just so strange, yet I love it. It's just so weird. Overall, while it is one of my least favorite cuts off of Countdown to Ecstasy, Your Gold Teeth is still really good. Showbiz Kids. This one's kind of about me to some extent, if you really think about it. You done thinking? Alright. This is definitely the most repetitive Steely Dan song in that the backing vocals repeat throughout the entire thing, but it makes up for it with the solos, considering that Skunk Baxter goes ham on this song. Showbiz Kids is a very Steely Dan song, considering the lyrics are based on Fagen and Becker's cynical worldview, has classic lines such as "I detect the El Supremo," a cheeky self-reference. It's a song that only people who don't like good music hate. Showbiz Kids goes hard. My Old School. People like this one for a reason. The reason being, it's an amazing song. You got that classic piano opening, the incredible horn arrangement, crazy Skunk Baxter solos, soul backing vocalists. It's all the works, and it's just a perfect example of classic rock Steely Dan. I am kind of biased because this is one of the songs that really got me into Steely Dan, and it's also quite autobiographical in that it's a fun retelling of the infamous Bard College drug bust. And again, I am a real sucker for this kind of stuff. The one nitpick I have for the song is that it's boomer bait, since it's a song about reminiscing about school, and it even has old school in the title, but other than that, it's definitely a top tier song. Pearl of the Quarter. It's back to more of a country-esque style like Dallas and Sail the Waterway, with a really nice pedal steel guitar throughout, which makes sense considering that it was on a 1971 demo reel. It's really calming, but it's pretty dark lyrically. The lovely tone of the song is just how the lovesick narrator sees the whole thing, while in reality, the woman he's fallen in love with sees him as nothing but another customer. It's probably my least favorite on the album, but it's still pretty good. King of the World. In my opinion, this is one of the best on the album. It's very underrated.
It's probably the most produced on the album with all of its effects, especially with the reverb and delay on the vocals, which fit the post-apocalyptic lyrics really well. My favorite parts of the song are the synth solos, especially the second one, which also has a guitar solo. I love the creepy little whispers along with Walter saying, "Earth to Dan, I think my face is on fire. Is this a bunch of beasts or a bunch of crap?" It's an excellent example of Steely Dan's high production values. It's also a nice look into the fears of the Cold War era, and overall it's just a really fun and fast-paced song that definitely deserves more praise. Alright, Pretzel Logic. This is the worst one. Now hear me out, I don't think Pretzel Logic is bad, but it's the worst Steely Dan album. Pretzel Logic seems kinda both experimental and commercial at the same time. Not a single song on this album goes past 4 minutes and 30 seconds. A bulk of the songs on this album are either pre-Dan demos like Berrytown, Parker's Band, and Charlie Freak, or seemingly unfinished experiments, specifically the shorter songs like Through with Buzz and With a Gun. It lacks the consistency that Countdown to Ecstasy had before it, but it also lacks the fun factor of Can't Buy a Thrill, and all you get here is just kind of a mess, to be honest. I will give Pretzel Logic the benefit of the doubt. It's definitely more jazz influenced than the previous two, which granted were already jazz influenced to begin with. And also a few of the cuts on this album are better than some of the other cuts on Can't Buy a Thrill and Countdown to Ecstasy, but other than that, it's definitely not the best. Starting off with Ricky Don't Lose That Number, it's a pretty good start. It peaked at number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, which makes it Steely Dan's biggest commercial hit, which it kind of deserves to be because it's the perfect example of what a Steely Dan song should be. A really nice blend of jazz and rock with great solos and chord changes, accompanied by weird lyrics about a strange loser. But every song that's better than it does one of those things, if not all of them so much better. Ricky, not bad, not incredible, it's just great in my opinion, and it really stands as sort of a reference point for the rest of this ranking. I think this is the middle, but if it's not, I'll move it later. Night by Night, on the other hand, this is the best track on Pretzel Logic by a pretty wide margin, not counting the title track, but we'll get to that later. This song is very cinematic with its lyrics and its arrangements, especially with the clavinet and the horns. The clavinet and the horns, along with the guitar, make up the bulk of the song, and it makes it seem really action-packed and cool. The incredible music makes the night-to-night struggles of the narrator seem more grandiose than they actually are, which is why I really love this song. Definitely one of the standout tracks on this album. Pretzel Logic immediately begins to fall flat with Any Major Dude Will Tell You. Now don't get me wrong, I don't think Any Major Dude is a bad song. I think it's pretty good, but in my opinion, it's very overrated. For starters, it's the most lighthearted Steely Dan song, which definitely isn't a bad thing. In fact, it's one of the things I like about this song. It makes it very unique. The acoustics are quite nice. They're not terrible or anything. Besides it being a standout with its lyrics, there's nothing really particularly interesting about Any Major Dude. It's just average, which is why I'm gonna put this at the top of C tier. Up next is Berrytown, and in my personal opinion, this is the worst Steely Dan song, barring You Gotta Walk It. It's not that I think that it's appallingly bad. I mean, there are a few things I like about it. The lyrics are nice. I'm always a sucker for those types of lyrics that rag on prejudiced people, especially by making their point of view seem ridiculous. And I also really like the percussion, especially the tambourine, but there's just really nothing interesting about Berrytown. Something about it is just really generic. I don't know if it's because of the instrument choice or the way it's mixed, but I don't know, it's just really boring and generic, which is something I don't like at all. Now don't get me wrong here, I'm not gonna be mad if I hear Berrytown playing at like a Walmart or something. It's Berrytown, it's fine, but it's just the least interesting Steely Dan song, which is why I have to put it in the bottom tier. East St. Louis Toodaloo. This is one of the better cuts off of Pretzel Logic. It's a nice little fun instrumental with cool arrangements, you know, I like the way that the guitar goes wow 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 wow. However, I have to deduct some points for it being Steely Dan's only studio cover. Definitely not the peak of Steely Dan, but it's not terrible. I like it. Parker's Band. It's a really groovy, fun song. The arrangements on this song are really good, especially that opening guitar solo and the drum arrangements, which I believe are dueling drums between Jim Gordon and Jeff Porcaro. They bring a lot of energy to the song. Lyrically, this is a song by Jazz Nuts for Jazz Nuts. I mean, I had to do some research to figure out all the references that Fagen and Becker put in the song. Overall, Parker's Band is a funky, groovy little jazz tune, and it doesn't really try to be much more than that. It's pretty good. Through with Buzz. Best song ever written. The only song that matters. Pretzel Logic. It's incredible. It's a very bluesy tune with weird, quirky lyrics that are so vague they might as well be about nothing. On one hand, the song might be about time travel, or on the other, it might be about the twisted pretzel logic of the losers in history. But that's besides the point. It's just a great song. I especially love the nice Walter guitar on this song. He plays it wonderfully, especially the solo. Can't forget about one of the greatest lines in Steely Dan history, "Where did you get those shoes?" If Night by Night didn't exist, this would be the best song on the album. With a Gun. It's alright. It's a short, sweet little country tune about a guy killing another guy. Really nothing else I can say about it. But like there. I think that's good. Charlie Freak. This is as close as Steely Dan gets to a Christmas song, with the jingle bells, the frozen space line. Ironically, it's really depressing, considering that it's about a guy who overdoses in the street on a cold winter night and dies from starvation. There's really no other way to visualize Charlie Freak than with the illustrated version made by Nathaniel Barlam, which I'll definitely link in the description. Overall, Charlie Freak is really good compared to the rest of the album. Alright, we'll put this like... A Monkey in Your Soul. It's a very silly song. What I love about this song is that it has a really stanky bass line. It also has these really funky guitar riffs that I really like. But at the end of the day, it's kind of boring. I get why people don't really like this one. This is going in C tier. Yeah, that seems about right. This All Too Mobile Home. This is probably as good as band era Steely Dan gets. For starters, this is the longest Steely Dan song, ranging from 4 to 13 minutes, but usually averages from about 7 to 11. The first part of the song showcases Fagen and Becker's brilliant songwriting, with the classic hopeless romantic type lyrics, with the twist being that the narrator is really poor, and it's pretty funny, to be honest. You also have the crazy Royce Jones and Michael McDonald backing vocals, which make the chorus super explosive, along with the crazy dueling guitar solos that create a harmony, which is honestly beautiful. This part of the song is usually followed by a crazy instrumental jam, which showcases the band's incredible ability to improvise. More often than not, these jams consist of Jim Hodder and Jeff Porcaro going ham on the drums, but sometimes they mix it up a little. Specifically, one I like a lot is the May 17th performance where Donald just messes around on the piano, and I think Jeff Baxter starts playing the bongos. It's absolutely wild. Also, I genuinely don't know if the 1974 version or the 2011 Rarities Night version is better, considering that the latter version has really good horn arrangements, and the Danettes are incredible backing vocalists, especially on this song. Either way, it's a really hype, crowd-pleaser type song, and it's honestly a shame that it never came into fruition in the studio as like the Rolling Man, or never put on Katy Lied or anything like that. It's honestly a top tier Steely Dan song. Now it's time to talk about Katy Lied. I absolutely love this album. It definitely serves as a transition point between the first two primary eras of Steely Dan, but at the same time, it has the best of both worlds. While it still has that raw energy and classic rock aura of band Steely Dan, it still has that sort of cohesiveness and tight playing of studio Steely Dan. While Katy Lied does have some notable flaws, particularly in quality due to the DBX noise reduction glitch that happened during production, and variety since it sounds like they're using the same instruments for every song, it makes up for these with its really good compositions. Also Michael McDonald. First up is Black Friday. It's a nice little bluesy rock tune and it's definitely one of the harder songs in the Steely Dan catalog, especially with the lead guitar, which is played by Walter Becker. The solo he does on this song is wild and definitely adds on to the rock factor of this song. I especially love the weird and quirky lyrics about an economic recession from the point of view of an everyman past his breaking point. Overall, it's just a really good song. It's definitely a high tier. Bad Sneakers. I love this song. It's a very Steely Dan sort of song. You know, it's a very depressing song about a loser past his prime who longs for simpler times. I've heard theories that this song is about Donald talking to Walter about his problems, particularly with the band with the line, 5 names that I can hardly stand to hear, including yours and mine and one more chimp who isn't here. Whether or not this is actually true, Bad Sneakers makes for a very interesting narrative about melancholy reminiscence, and that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. Another reason why I like it is because of the subtle production. I especially love the little vibraphone section that starts to come in during the second pre-chorus. It just adds so much, yet it's so subtle. It's honestly beautiful. The guitars are also really good on this song. Again, Walter does the lead guitar on this song, and I assume Denny Dias plays the electric sitar, but it's not mentioned anywhere in the credits. They both managed to capture that reflective and melancholy mood of the song perfectly. Also, Walter's guitar solo is definitely one of the top 20 moments he went beast mode. Oh yeah, almost forgot to mention, this is my favorite instance of Michael McDonald's backing vocals. One of the best Steely Dan songs of all time. Definitely an S tier song. I think I'll put it like here. Yeah, that seems about right. Rose Darling. It's alright. The definite highlight of this song is the lyrics, which are probably the most confounding in the entire discography. To this day, people still have discussions on whether it's about an affair or masturbation. Nobody really knows, and that's the beauty of it. Musically, however, I think that it's pretty average. I really like all the chord changes, especially in the piano track, but at the same time, the instrument choice just makes it come off as an average rock song. As a whole, definitely my least favorite cut off this album, but it's alright. I'll put it at the top of C tier. Yeah. Daddy Don't Live in That New York City No More. This is a very underrated song. It's quite bluesy, and it has a sort of really gritty vibe, which I think fits more with the Royal Scam. But anyway, it's really made this way by the guitars, especially the rhythm guitar. It's really funky. This kind of sound fits perfectly with the narrative of this absent father figure who's going around town engaging in debauchery. It's so good. It also has one of my favorite bridges out of all the Steely Dan songs, and fun fact, a line from that said bridge, drinking dinner from a paper sack, comes straight from the pre-Dan demo, I Can't Function. Anyway, this is a very good song. I love it. Definitely a high tier song. Dr. Wu. This is one of the best Steely Dan songs of all time. Lyrically, it paints this beautiful narrative of heroin addiction framed as a lost love, which is very unique since most Steely Dan songs are literal rather than metaphorical. Musically, it's just as brilliant. Incredible drumming by Jeff Porcaro, something that's really persistent throughout most of the album, but especially here. The combination of piano and Fender Rhodes throughout the entire song just makes for a transcendent experience. It just goes beyond words how good it is. Beautiful vocal harmonies by Donald Fagen, especially during the chorus and the outro. Of course, you can't talk about Dr. Wu without talking about Phil Wood's legendary saxophone solo, which, according to Denny Dias, in the first mix of the song, it just didn't fade out at the end. That's how good it is. As a whole, Dr. Wu is just incredible, and it's really hard to put into any more words to describe how good it is. And the only downside I can think of is that if you turn it loud enough, you can hear the tape rolling. It's just a banger. All around banger. Top tier. For sure. Everyone's Gone to the Movies. This is by far the creepiest Steely Dan song, considering that it's literally about a groomer. And it's not super subtle about it either. Funny thing is, the song itself sounds really fun, and it has this sort of like party type vibe, which is an incredible use of irony on Faden and Becker's part. The song kind of hints at this degeneracy with the little horns in between the come on. It breaks the tone, and it kind of makes you think about what the song is really about without having it completely spelled out for you. The rest of the instrumental? Great, like many other Steely Dan songs, especially the vibraphone section, which is played by Victor Feldman. Really good. Just another really Steely Dan type Steely Dan song. Your Gold Teeth 2. This is a really relaxing song that's basically about nothing. One of my favorite parts of this song is the opening jam, which is sourced from an instrumental jam that the Dan would play in 1974. I assume they did this because it was unlikely they'd ever play it again, so they might as well put it on a record, but anyway. This song has an incredible Denny Dias guitar solo. It's a guitar solo that's perfectly jazzy, like the rest of the song. It's just a really good jazz fusion song. The rest of the song musically is also really good. Great drum work, great piano, great vocals, especially the vocal harmony in the chorus. It's so good. Lyrically, however, it's also confounding like Your Gold Teeth 1. I think it's about gambling like its predecessor, but who really knows? And that's part of the fun. Definitely a high tier song. Chain Lightning. It's basically Pretzel logic, except way more low key, and it's also about the Nazis. Musically, it's pretty good. Definitely the most unique, since I think it's the only song on this album that doesn't have piano. Very nice vocal harmonies. Rick Derringer's guitar work is the highlight of this song, since it really makes up the backbone of that bluesy rock sound they were going for. It's a cool song. Not much else to say about it. Any World That I'm Welcome To. A lot of people parade this one as the centerpiece of the album, and perhaps one of the best Steely Dan songs, but in my opinion, it's quite overrated. However, I don't think this is a terrible song. Of course not. I still think it's pretty great. It has the nice composition, really good instrumental work, especially with the pianos and keyboards, and the classic lyrics that portray a down-on-his-luck loser who just wants to escape from the world he's living in. However, I think that the Michael McDonald backing vocals can be a bit overbearing at times, along with the fact that the chorus feels kind of repetitive, especially in the outro. Overall, pretty great song, nothing beyond that. We'll put it there. Throwback the Little Ones. This is probably the most underrated song out of the original 7 albums. It's very evocative with its lyrics about a narc, and combined with the unique element of the accordion, it makes for a very somber yet cinematic experience. Great piano work, especially with the hammering before the chorus, incredible horn arrangements, great solos, and I really can't imagine the album ending in any other way than that little piano sequence at the end. It's just so good. This is definitely a top tier song. Now on to The Royal Scam. People consider this one of the top 3 albums along with Asia and Gaucho, and for a good reason. This is a time when Steely Dan really tried to hone in on jazz rock, and without a better way to put it, it's like if jazz rock overdosed on rock. It's so cool. While it isn't my favorite, it's definitely the coolest and the hardest of the bunch. As I mentioned previously, this album has a really gritty, dirty sort of vibe, and I think it fits perfectly with the more edgy and dark, cynical lyrics. On to the songs themselves. First up is Kid Charlemagne. In my opinion, this song is perfect. What else do I say about Kid Charlemagne? Because all I wrote in the notes is perfect, top tier. The lyrics are brilliant in that they're both incredibly vague to the point where they can really be applied to anyone, but they're so unbelievably specific in that they're about Owsley Stanley, the LSD chemist. But what I really love about this song is the music. It's incredible. There's so much going on, like you got 3 different keyboards, 2 different guitars, but at the same time, it's mixed so perfectly and subtly to where it harmonizes beautifully. Not to mention the guitar solo, which is probably the greatest in all of rock history, which is played by none other than Larry Carlton. It's really hard to describe this song other than perfect. It's just so good. Alright, before we move on, I'd like to make a few adjustments here. Let's put that there. Yeah, we'll put this here. That seems about right. Anyway, moving on to The Caves of Altamira. This song has everything I love about Steely Dan. Great keyboard work, phenomenal horn arrangements, it has one of the best sax solos and one of the best closing sequences out of the whole discography, the classic cynical lyrics about the loss of innocence. It's got all the works, and it's a crazy good song even if it does run a bit short. But you know, that doesn't stop it from being one of the best. I'll put it above Throwback the Little Ones, yeah. Don't Take Me Alive. This is definitely one of the stinkers on this album, so to speak. It's not bad, but it's just not as good as the rest. Larry Carlton goes crazy on this song, especially in the opening and middle guitar solos. Don't Take Me Alive has this really nice Rhodes arrangement too. It's really great. And as a whole, this song has a really cool and almost hectic tone, which fit the lyrics about a lunatic criminal perfectly. So what is wrong with this song? Really nothing. I don't hate Don't Take Me Alive, but in my opinion, it's just not as interesting as the rest of the album. It's really good, but not as good as what comes before and after it. This is a high tier song. Sign In Stranger. Again, this is one of the weaker songs on the album. It's a funky little sci-fi tune, which is pretty unique compared to the rest of the discography. The song also has a really nice bridge, which leads into this really fantastic, groovy piano solo played by Paul Griffin. The outro of the song is also really nice, especially with the horn ensemble. Despite it having all this good stuff, the one thing I don't really like about it is its slow pace. I mean, I get it, they were trying to make a more slow funk groove, but it's really not for me. But at the same time, I still think it's really good. The Fez. When you do it without the Fez on. But for real though, this has to be one of the funkiest Steely Dan songs. It's so good. It's such a jam, dude. I don't care if you think it's overrated. I don't care if it gets circle jerked to death. The Fez, top tier Steely Dan song. For sure. Same thing with the next song, Green Earrings. Green Earrings is probably the coolest song on this album. Got the fast pace, high action. The lyrics about this remorseless thief who was willing to steal from his lover fit perfectly with this hectic and devious sort of sound, especially with the clavinet and the drums. I especially love the guitar solos done by Denny Dias and Elliot Randall. There's a fine contrast between Dias's more smooth and jazzy playing and Randall's more hectic and hard rock oriented style. It goes absolutely crazy, alright? It's overall one of the best on the album. Do I like it more than Bad Sneakers? That is a good question. Do I like Green Earrings more than I do Bad Sneakers? We'll just leave it there for now. Haitian Divorce. This song is really low-key, and it's quite jarring coming out of Green Earrings, but I still kind of like that contrast. The talkbox guitar is definitely the star here, since it's really what makes it unique compared to the rest of the discography. The song also has that sort of subtle complexity that I love, specifically with this really subtle vibraphone, which is coupled with the keyboards and the piano to make such a brilliant song. As for the lyrics, I think they're great. They find this really nice middle ground between humor and tragedy. I especially love the line, "Now we dolly back, now we fade to black," which is hilarious. As a whole, Haitian Divorce is a really good song, but in my opinion, it's one of the lesser songs on this album. I think that the song is better than Sign In Stranger and Don't Take Me Alive, but it's also not as good as the top tier Royal Scam songs. So it's just gonna go right above those two. Everything You Did. This is another really underrated song. There's this fun fan theory that Everything You Did is the direct aftermath of Haitian Divorce, which I think is hilarious. This brings me to the lyrics, which are probably the only bad thing about the song. They're a bit redundant, especially at the end of most of the lines, which are, some variation of, "Are you gonna tell me everything you did, baby?" It makes up for this by just sounding so good. Like, it just sounds so cool, and it feels like everything just comes to a head here. Like, this is the climax of the Royal Scam. Not to mention, "Turn Up the Eagles, the Neighbors Are Listening" is one of the most quotable things in Steely Dan. Overall, it's such a fun, goofy, and above all, incredible song. Definitely one of the best off this album. Finally, from the Royal Scam is The Royal Scam. It's pretty repetitive music-wise, but I think that's the point, since the lyrics are about the endless cycle of immigrants falling for this scam of the American dream. And I love the way that the song starts and ends with the line, "And they wandered in from the city of St. John without a dime." It paints such a beautiful yet tragic picture of the poor living conditions of poor immigrants. I also really like the part of the song where Donald Fagen grunts into the microphone. Overall, pretty good. I like it. Now we're really getting into the best of the best, starting with Steely Dan's 1977 album, Asia. It's the album that they're known for that isn't Can't Buy a Thrill. A lot of people have gotten into Steely Dan by this album, and I'm really no different. This is the first Steely Dan album I fell in love with. Asia represents a milestone that Fagen and Becker reached in perfecting their craft, especially the jazz side of the jazz rock they were making. They managed to make such slick, clean songs, and all the while kept their classic sardonicism and wit throughout the entire thing. So what do I think about this album? I like Asia. It's pretty good. Starting off with Black Cow. It's a seemingly light-hearted breakup song. Instrumental-wise, Black Cow is phenomenal. The keyboards are great, but can be a bit goofy at times, particularly in the opening. But what I really love about this song is the horn arrangements. You got the horn ensemble, sax solo, the crazy outro. It's just so good. It also works incredibly well as an opener, considering that it serves as a transition between the clavinet-heavy and cynical Royal Scam to the super jazzy and relatively lighthearted Asia. The outro is definitely one of the top 10 moments Steely Dan went beast mode. Like, it really doesn't get better than those horn arrangements and the backup singers singing so outrageous. It's just so good. Where would I put this? I think I'll put this in S tier. I think I like it more than the Pretzel Logic songs. Next is the title track. First off, the lyrics. In typical Steely Dan fashion, they're confusing as ever. I mean, I don't know if this song is about like a rehab clinic or an insane asylum, but they're not really important since they're not the main part of the song. The real star of the show here is the instrumental segment, which is perhaps the best out of the entire discography, notably with the drum solos played by Steve Gadd, the guitar solo played by Denny Dias, and the sax solo played by Wayne Shorter. It's all just so legendary. It's hard not to mention the solos when talking about this song. They're just so good. On top of that, they also just put so much in this song. There's just so many instruments, so much going on, and it's beautiful. Asia kind of serves as an overture for the rest of the album, but at the same time, it can stand on its own. Overall, I love it. I think that this song would be the best on this album if it weren't for the next song, Deacon Blues. This is the Steely Dan song. It feels like a song that Fagen and Becker really put their heart and soul into. Lyrically, Deacon Blues is about as autobiographical as Fagen and Becker gets, since the song is about a down-on-his-luck white kid from the suburbs wanting to make it big and become a jazz musician. To me, this song is not about success. This is a look into the sad life of a hopeless dreamer longing to escape loserdom. And when it seems like he's finally figured everything out, has he really changed? As Walter Becker put it, this song is about a broken dream of a broken man living a broken life. Someone who thinks they've made it, but deep down inside knows that nothing has changed and they're still a loser. Existential Crisis, the song. Musically, on the other hand, it's one of their most complex songs, especially with the incredibly diverse instrument choice. You got the Fender Rhodes played by Victor Feldman. You got the tasty, jazzy guitar licks played by Larry Carlton and Lee Ritenour. The soft acoustic guitar throughout the entire song played by Dean Parks. The groovy bass played by Walter Becker. The crazy drumming by Bernard Pretty Purdy. The beautiful sax solo played by Pete Chrislieb. The incredible, absolutely phenomenal horn arrangements. The little chiptune synth laid underneath the horns during the instrumental segment. Can't forget about the vocalists either. You got Vanetta Fields, Shirley Matthews, and Clyde King providing such beautiful soul-type backing vocals, which brings so much life into that iconic chorus. Donald Fagen's lead vocals, which fit this tragic narrator perfectly. It's so much, and it all harmonizes so beautifully with the most perfect production of all time. As a whole, Deacon Blues is simply a masterpiece. Up next is Peg. This is the yacht rock song, I think. You really can't talk about Peg without talking about the bass playing, which is absolutely phenomenal, and I think that reigns true throughout the entire album. Chuck Rainey, the GOAT, alright? He put up the partition, slapped away, and nobody knew. That's why he's the GOAT. While we're on the note of things that you can't not mention when talking about Peg, 7 different guitarists were asked to do the guitar solo on this song, but no one could do it better than Jay Graydon. I think this is a perfect solo, and it's one of my favorites out of all the solos in Steely Dan. Also, Michael McDonald screaming Peg during the chorus is just one of the most memorable things of any Steely Dan song. Lyrically, Peg is quite similar to Reelin' in the Years in that it's from the perspective of this sort of pissed ex-boyfriend type character, but where it differs is that it's more about his obsession with his ex after she left him to pursue acting. The kind of acting that Peg actually does is really left up to interpretation, but the narrator makes it seem more seedy and explicit than it actually might be, which again, like Reelin' in the Years, creates this sort of unreliable narrator character, which is really good. Just like the song, which I'm going to put at the top of A tier. I'm also going to move some stuff real fast. Yeah, I think that looks good for right now. Home at Last. This is definitely the most low-key song on this album. You really can't talk about this song without mentioning the Purdy Shuffle, which is just what makes the whole thing what it is. Just a nice little groove, a little funk. It's just relaxing. The lyrics are very unique and interesting in that they're an allusion to Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey. And while they're not my favorite, I think they fit perfectly with the soothing sound of the instrumental. Speaking of, the instrumental is definitely the highlight of the song, especially with the piano and the horns. I also love that subtle vibraphone hidden underneath the piano track. It just gives it so much depth. And the production is just so good. Overall, Home at Last is a brilliant song. Definitely a top tier song. Yeah. I Got the News. People say this is the worst song on the album, and I can kind of see why because of how barren it seems at first with just the piano, the bass, and the drums. But as soon as the instrumental really kicks in, this is when it becomes one of the best songs on the album. There's just so much going on. Like, you got the horns, you got the fake strings, you got Michael McDonald backing vocals. It's just such a fun song. And that instrumental breakdown with the Walter Becker guitar solo, definitely one of the top 10 moments when Steely Dan went beast mode. A very enjoyable experience. I Got the News is really underrated. Definitely one of the best tracks on Asia. I think I like Dr. Wu more. Yeah. Finally, we have Josie. Musically, while the intro is quite strange, it really goes off afterward. While it is definitely the most rock-based song on the album, it's still really jazzy and bluesy and funky. It's just so good. Again, Chuck Rainey plays the bass on the song, goes so hard. Combined with the rhythm guitar, along with the Fender Rhodes keyboard, it just makes such a nice harmonized sound. Josie also has a few experimental elements, considering it has the artificial strings like in I Got the News, but it also has this trash can lid overdub during the section before the solo, which, you know, bangs. The solo just goes hard because Walter does it. They really made a song about doing street stuff sound like a song about doing street stuff, at least by 1970 standards, but overall, the song goes hard. Definitely a high-tier Steely Dan song. I wonder how many times I say Steely Dan in this video. Up next, the 1978 singles. They alright. FM is a groovy little funky tune about having a party. It's quite simple. It's to be expected considering they made this one in 4 days, but it kind of serves as whiplash coming out of the super complex Asia. Anyway, the song has two versions. The original 1978 single release with the closing Walter Becker guitar solo, and the 1991 re-release on the expanded version of Gold, which combines FM with the next song and has a Pete Lied closing sax solo. And I really don't know which one I like more. Overall, FM's just a really solid song, definitely going the top of the mid-tier. Speaking of the Pete Lied solo, here is FM Reprise, which is basically just that. I don't really know if you can count this as its own song, and there's just really no reason to listen to it other than the unique opening. But at the end of the day, it's FM, but at the same time, it's not really its own song, so it's going in the bottom tier. Here at the Western World. While technically speaking, Here at the Western World isn't a 1978 single, considering that it was made during the production of The Royal Scam, it was first released as part of the Greatest Hits album in 1978, so I'm gonna count it as one. I love this song simply because of the contrast between the music and the lyrics. It's a really soothing song about a whorehouse, or heroin addiction, or the Nazis escaping to Argentina. But it doesn't really matter since it's just a nice, relaxing song. I get why they didn't put this on the album because it's very tonally different to the Royal Scam, and it kind of feels like something off of Katy Lied or Pretzel Logic. Overall, it's just really solid. I like this one. Alright, before we move on to the next album, I think I'm going to make a few changes here, since some of this seems really off. Alright, so that seems about right for now. I'll make some more changes before we conclude here. So let's just get right into Gaucho, the best album ever made, and you're wrong if you think otherwise. I've made a whole 16-minute video discussing why Gaucho is the best album ever made, and I think you should watch that if you haven't already, since I'm going to be reiterating some of the same points I made in that video. While we're on the topic of Gaucho, the best way to listen to this album is definitely the 5.1 mix, but if you can, get your hands on an original pressing or a Japanese remaster, because the original remaster that they put on the CDs just isn't very good. I mean, it sounds fine, but there are a few glaring flaws with it, specifically the tape dropouts in the title track and Time Out of Mind. Anyway, let's just get right into the songs themselves, starting with Babylon Sisters. Sound-wise, it seems like it's the polar opposite of Home at Last. Like Home at Last, this song has Bernard Pretty Purdy performing his famous Purdy Shuffle, but unlike that song, it's very cold and downbeat. You know, you have the Fender Rhodes instead of the piano, more aggressive horn arrangements, screaming. The lyrics are also something that's in stark contrast to Home at Last, or anything out of Asia, really. Rather than being a seemingly light-hearted song with bits of snark and cynicism here and there, Babylon Sisters explores the life of a loser past his prime who is trying to relive his youth by hiring young sex workers, which ends up destroying him as a result. This isn't a bad thing, however. I think this is a great thing. This is what really sets Gaucho apart from Asia, since Asia is more like a collection of 7 really nice, clean-sounding jazz rock songs with not a lot of cohesion, while Gaucho is more like a concept album almost, in that it's really 7 little vignettes built around the common concept of a loser past his prime, which is covered up for the most part by the perfect production and the tightest playing known to man. Babylon Sisters exemplifies this perfectly, which is why it works so well as an opener. Despite how brilliant I think Babylon Sisters is, I think that most of the songs on this album are better. I mean, come on, it's the rest of Gaucho. Also, I use this song to test sound equipment, and I think sometimes too much Babylon Sisters is too much. It's going in the top tier, but the lower half. I'd say higher than Midnight Cruiser, higher than the Campfire Thrill songs. Hey 19. While this is my least favorite of the album, it's really good. I love this song. This song is very simple yet effective, since it's really just vocals, Fender Rhodes, bass, guitar, Wendell drumming, but it's just so smooth. It's just so funky, groovy. It's just great. Again, it has the story of this loser past his prime, but unlike Babylon Sisters, it's really up to you how the song ends. Maybe he ends the night drinking and doing drugs alone, or maybe he's got all that stuff for the 19-year-old in exchange for sexual favors. It's really up to interpretation, and I really like that. Classic Steely Dan type stuff. It's just a really good song, despite it being the worst on Gaucho. Definitely going in a higher tier here. Probably the top of A tier. I'm not biased at all. Alright, up next is Glamour Profession. This one is the deep cut that isn't really a deep cut because it gets circle jerked to death on Twitter and Reddit. I gotta say, it gets circle jerked for a reason because Glamour Profession is one of their best songs. The only bad thing about it is that it's repetitive, but it's very complex in its arrangements and composition. So many chord changes, especially like in the bass line, which is played by Anthony Jackson. Really good bass player. And the song is probably as good as it gets for Steely Dan in terms of storytelling. It's just a brilliant narrative. It's so descriptive and it invokes so much imagery about the escapades of a coke dealer. Definitely a top tier, but I don't know where in top tier. I think I would put this above King of the World, probably. Yeah. Gaucho. It's a masterpiece. Alright. Tightest playing on any Steely Dan song, especially with the drums, which were played by Jeff Porcaro. Cleanest production, amazing horn arrangements, funny lyrics. It's just so good. It honestly just kind of speaks for itself. It's a perfect example of Gaucho's gilded nature, since you have this beautiful, perfect instrumental, which is covering up this narrative about this guy and his relationship problems. Sure, it might be a turnoff for some people since it's one of Steely Dan's slower songs, or it's a bit too jazzy and clean to the point where it sounds like elevator music. That's what I love about Gaucho so much, and maybe even the whole album. It's just so polarizing and different. It's just Gaucho. How else do I describe it? Definitely a top tier. I think I'll put this one right below Deacon Blues. It's just so good. It's really hard to put into words that I haven't already said about how good Gaucho is, but it's just so good. Time Out of Mind. Again, it's perfect. It's the perfect example of simple yet complex. It runs with the same chord progression throughout most of the song, but there's just so many instruments added onto that. Like, you got the crazy horn arrangements, the beautiful guitar played by Mark Knopfler, the incredible bass played by none other than Walter Becker, and you also got this organ track laid underneath the main piano track. There's just so much going on. Like the title track, it perfectly embodies the album's Gilded Nature because it has such a fun, upbeat, clean instrumental, while lyrically, the song is about doing heroin. And I gotta say, the top one moment when Steely Dan went beast mode is the instrumental breakdown of this song. Like, man, just listen to it, it speaks for itself. Also, fun little thing to note, this song doesn't actually have Wendell drumming on it, it's just a really good take by Rick Marotta, which just adds on to how perfect it is. I really don't know if Gaucho or Time Out of Mind is better, so we're just gonna put them in the same place. Alright? My Rival. Very underrated song. It's a very funky little song, especially with the keyboards, particularly the organs, and the funky little guitar riffs. For the most part, it sounds weird, but that's what adds to the charm. It's just really weird, and I love that. Especially the horn arrangements. The horn arrangements are very strange, yet they fit perfectly with this song. Everything harmonizes to create this sort of film noir type vibe, which is very unique for a Steely Dan song. Lyrically, it also kind of has this vibe, especially with lines like, "I've got detectives on his case, they filmed the whole charade," and "Sure, he's a Jolly Roger until he answers for his crime." It's definitely a one-of-a-kind song, which is why I love it so much. It's just such a funky, groovy, little strange, weird tune. My Rival is definitely a top-tier Steely Dan song. And you know what? I think it's better than Glamour Profession. Alright? It's better than Glamour Profession. Definitely a very underrated song. Finally from Gaucho is Third World Man. Definitely the least fitting of the bunch, considering that it was a throwaway song from the Royal Scam titled Were You Blind That Day, which was rewritten into this song. I've probably told this story at least like 5 times. But anyway, despite how relatively unfitting it is compared to the rest of Gaucho, it still really works as a closer, considering how sorrowful and defeated the song just sounds. Especially considering that this was the last song before Two Against Nature, which was 20 years later. The lyrics are also really confounding, considering that there's just so many interpretations of the song. Some say it's about a veteran suffering from PTSD, others think that it's a song about child soldiers, and some other people think that it was about the dirty war happening in Argentina at the time. It's just so open to interpretation, and that's one of the things I really like about this song. Not to mention, Larry Carlton does the guitar solo on the song, and it's probably his best work with Steely Dan. Gonna be honest, I think it's better than the Kid Charlemagne solo. I'm not biased at all. I love Gaucho, sure, but I'm not biased. 100%. No, not at all. Not biased. Definitely a high tier song. I'll put it above Hey 19 for now, I guess. Now on to the 90s live songs, which are Wet Side Story, Cash Only Island, and The Steely Dan Show, with the latter technically not being part of this group considering I believe it was first played in 2000, but I'm grouping it with the other two for the sake of cohesion. Now you may be wondering why I'm talking about Cash Only Island and Wet Side Story, because at the beginning of the video I specifically said no outtakes, and these two songs are technically outtakes since they were considered for Two Against Nature. But I decided to include them because I don't think it would have been fair to have the only 2 live songs I talk about be This All Too Mobile Home and The Steely Dan Show. And you know, I've only talked about these songs once, and I'd like to talk about them again because they're good. Anyway, first up is Wet Side Story. It's a goofy little coming-of-age/love song. I don't really like it that much, but I'll give it credit. I had a smile on my face when I was listening to it. Anyway, I really like the arrangements, especially with the keyboards and those horns, man. The horns! It's so good. And you also got this horn solo, followed by what I think is a Walter Becker guitar solo. I'm not totally sure. Which is, always great. As a whole, West Side Story is just a really nice, fun, feel-good song. But I understand why they didn't put it on Two Against Nature. Definitely a high-tier song. I think I'll put it, in the middle. Next up is Cash Only Island. Musically, it's not the best. It's pretty funky, and that's kind of it. But what I really like about this song is the lyrics. It's almost on the same level of storytelling as Glamour Profession. This song is about a woman who goes to a casino to decompress after a tough work week, and this song just goes all out in painting such a detailed picture of this, along with exposing the sort of gilded nature of casinos. And yet again, it's another really good example of Fagen and Becker's brilliant songwriting. As a whole, it's really good. I like this song. I think I'd put it right next to Wet Side Story. Last from this group is the Steely Dan Show. Like Wet Side Story, it's just a nice little feel-good song, but this time in a literal sense, considering that it's about how you come to a Steely Dan concert and just chill. Anyway, the Steely Dan Show is a neat little lounge jazz type tune. A really beautiful moment in the song is this nice sax solo backed by a brass section which sounds like it came straight from Everything Must Go, followed by Walter Becker fiddling about on his guitar, which, moments like these I'm always a sucker for, because I'm a Becker-pilled individual, gonna be honest. If you remember when I was talking about This All Too Mobile Home, I said that the 2011 version might be better because the Danettes are really good backing vocalists. In the Steely Dan Show, they really make this song what it is, especially with the neat little harmony at the end. It's just such an incredible song, but I feel like it only really works in the context of a Steely Dan concert. It feels like a novelty song, but at the same time, it's just way more than that. I think this is a top tier Steely Dan song. Where would I put this in top tier? I think at the bottom of top tier. Alright, so before we get to the last two albums, I think I'm going to make a few changes here, since some of this just doesn't look right at all. Alright, I think that's good. Alright, so Two Against Nature. Like Gaucho, this is a very polarizing album, and even more so with a lot of people saying that this album isn't very good. I guess I can understand why there's a bit of stigma behind this one, because younger people don't like it, and most of Steely Dan in general, because it's seen as lame dad rock, along with the fact that it beat out Kid A and the Marshall Mathers LP at the Grammys. And older people don't really like this album because it's not the Steely Dan they used to know. Some common criticisms I see of this album are that it lacks soul and is a lot more mellow compared to previous Steely Dan albums, and Donald Fagen's vocal ability is greatly weakened because of his age. While these are valid criticisms, and admittedly they're criticisms that I had when I first listened to this album, this doesn't stop it from being one of their best. In my opinion, this is their third best album. Two Against Nature is when Steely Dan really matured into their sound. It really cements their signature style of jazz rock with R&B, blues, and funk inflections, but it also tries to expand on this with more experimental elements, notably in songs like Two Against Nature and Negative Girl. It's a fantastic album, and it definitely deserved the Grammy in my opinion, even though award shows are stupid. But anyway, let's just get right into the songs themselves. First up is Gaslighting Abby. It's a phenomenal opener. It's a very funky and groovy song with a really weird and quirky chord progression that really sets it apart from most of the discography. This song is very complex, like you got 2 different keyboards, 3 different guitars, crazy horn arrangements, all the works, and it just harmonizes so perfectly to create this devious vibe that fits perfectly with the devious lyrics about a husband trying to gaslight his wife with the help of his mistress. It's like something that they've done before, but at the same time it's just so unique, which is a really good way to describe the album as a whole. Overall, Gaslighting Abby is just a really solid song and opener. It's definitely a high tier song, but the best is yet to come. Where exactly would I put this? I think I'd put this above Gold Teeth too. Or maybe above Peg. We'll put it like there for now. Might move it later. What a Shame About Me. This one really shows how much more mellow Steely Dan has gotten. I'd say it's the most rock-based song on this album, but at the same time it has this really smooth, soft sort of sound. And what really adds onto that is Walter Becker's guitar playing on this song. It's really good. It's very smooth and classy, but at the same time there's still a bit of muscle behind it. The song as a whole is also really simple yet complex, since it has the baseline Steely Dan instrument choice. You got your Fender Rhodes, piano, guitar, horn arrangements, but at the same time, the way they were written, arranged, and mixed is just so subtle and complex. It's definitely one of those songs that you can listen to over and over again and hear something new every time. For example, I just listened to this song recently for this video, and I didn't know there was this really subtle percussion during the second chorus. It's like a bongo or something. Anyway, the song falls under the loser past his prime category, but at the same time it tries to do something new with it by making the narrator realize how much of a loser he is compared to his old college buddies. He's so wrapped up in his own shame that he refuses to have sex with his old college fling because of it. It's really depressing, probably their most depressing song. And it brings this common concept to a whole new level. As a whole, it's one of the lesser songs on the album in my opinion, but it's still fantastic. I'll put it right next to Gaslighting Abby for now. Two Against Nature. This is one of the best songs on the album. It's just such a jam, right? Keith Carlock, incredible drummer, really goes hard on this track, alright? It's groovy, it's funky. So much is going on with the instrumental. You got the main piano riffs, really funky guitar licks, crazy horn arrangements, and you really can't forget the star of the show here, the extensive percussion section with the triangle, the cowbell, the main drumming, and the bongos. It's just incredible. Lyrically, the song is basically the same as the Steely Dan show in that it's about Fagen and Becker making music for people to enjoy. It's made a lot more fun with the voodoo allegories, which just makes it all the more unique. Definitely one of the best Steely Dan songs. And to add on to that, it references this obscure song that Donald Fagen wrote for a satire book titled The Mop Song 2000 with the fire mop. Automatically a top tier. I'm gonna put it right next to Time Out of Mind, that's how good it is. Janie Runaway. This is yet another classic example of that sort of simple yet effective type of song I really like. The song is kind of barren almost, considering it's pretty much just made up of really funky guitar riffs, bass, a few chords being played on the Rhodes, horn section, but it doesn't really need to be overly complex because where the song really shines is with its lyrics. By far, Janie Runaway is the darkest Steely Dan song. It's funny, wacky little tune about a groomer pretty much kidnapping a runaway girl, which is pretty classic, admittedly, for Steely Dan to have this sort of dark, edgy subject matter, but it lacks a bit of subtlety, especially with the line, "Or would that be a federal case?" Overall, Janie Runaway is a banger. Going in A tier. Almost Gothic. If you need a song to define simple yet complex, here it is. It's very soft, soothing, and intricately mixed. Most of the song is made up of the keyboards and the bass, but there are really subtle elements that just make everything pop, like this really subtle acoustic guitar in the back, really great percussion section, especially with the triangle, and this really simple yet effective horn arrangement. This song just makes me happy, alright? Not many songs can do that, but, Almost Gothic is one of them, alright? This is the best song about wanting to be domed by a mentally ill alt girl ever made, and for that alone, it's an S tier song, for sure. It's just so relatable, it hurts. I'm sorry, alright? I'm sorry, Any World fans. I'm sorry, Asia fans. I'm sorry to everyone, alright? I'm sorry to everyone. This is one of the best Steely Dan songs. No doubt about it. Putting this one there. Jack of Speed. This is the song from the album. At least from what I've seen, most people who don't like Two Against Nature at the very least see Jack of Speed as the standout track from the album. Jack of Speed has this perfect combination of jazz and rock, which just goes full force, yet it still manages to be so soft and smooth. Again, it has the classic Steely Dan dark subject matter, which is about losing a partner to drug addiction. Like a lot of the other songs on this album, I'm incredibly biased considering that Walter does the solo. They're just incredible on this album. Walter Becker was an incredible guitarist, and I don't know how many times I'm going to throw down the word incredible, but that's what this album deserves. It's incredible. I think that the song would be slightly better if Walter sang it like during the Art Crimes tour in 1996. Maybe I'm also biased in that department because I'm a real Walter Becker enjoyer. Overall, Jack of Speed, real banger for the ages, alright? Definitely a top tier. I think I'd put this one between the other two songs. Cousin Dupree. In my opinion, this is the one stinker on Two Against Nature. Instrumental wise, it's brilliant. It's really funky, really groovy, really nice auditory experience. Basically on par with anything else from the Steely Dan discography. But what really sets me off about this song is the lyrics. Lyrically, it's just really on the nose. There's really no subtlety at all in the lyrics. Maybe a few double entendres and innuendos here and there, but there's no question at all what the song is about. Specifically the line, "What's so strange about a down-home family romance," just kills me. The song isn't bad though. Again, really good instrumental. The concept is unique, I'll give it that. But at the same time, it's quite a far cry from the crypticness and subtlety you'd come to expect from Steely Dan lyrics. I think I'm gonna put this one, like, top of C tier, probably. Negative Girl. This is probably the most underrated Steely Dan song. For one, it's part of Two Against Nature, and, you know, it's Two Against Nature, it already has that going against it. And another thing, people don't really talk about this song. Definitely one of the best songs on this album, though. It's very experimental and odd compared to the rest of the album, but it works. I didn't get it first listen, I didn't really get it the second, but the more I listened to it, the more I started to fall in love with the song. It's very weird, and that's what makes the song really unique and special in my eyes. The lyrics aren't as special, considering they're about an estranged heroin addict girlfriend, but like, the instrumental just blew me away when I really started to get it. Especially the vibraphone solo. I mean, I didn't really need to get the weirdness of the song to appreciate the vibraphone solo played by Dave Shank, but it just adds on to how weird and quirky this song is. Overall, it's a top tier. I love the song. Really underrated. I think I'll put this one, like, here. Might move it later. Might move everything later, but that's for later. West of Hollywood. Again, this is one of those songs that represents Two Against Nature, in that, like Jack of Speed, at the very least, people who don't like this album appreciate this song. The definite highlight of this song is Chris Potter's phenomenal saxophone solo that takes up like half the song. It's so freeform, it's so brilliant, it's just really good. I don't really know how to put into words how good it is, but it's just really good. The rest of the song, great. West of Hollywood tells the story of a lost love, and it does it in such a Steely Dan way with just a bunch of weird jargon along with name dropping, specifically Dr. Warren Kruger, which is really funny in my opinion. This is also Steely Dan's longest song at 8 minutes and 23 seconds, and I gotta say, it doesn't get boring or repetitive or irritating in the slightest. It's just so good. As a whole, West of Hollywood, definitely one of the best Steely Dan songs, like most of the album. It's just a real injustice that people sleep on Two Against Nature so much. I think it goes there, probably. Last but definitely least is Everything Must Go. I'm gonna make this quick. There you go. So here we are, the final set of songs, Everything Must Go. Like Two Against Nature, Everything Must Go has this sort of stigma behind it, which I don't really understand. I mean, sure, some of the criticisms from Two Against Nature can carry over into this album, like for example, Donald's aging voice, or more leaning towards soft rock and jazz, which makes it sound kind of soulless. Despite these criticisms, I still think that Everything Must Go is one of their best albums. While it's not as solid or experimental as Two Against Nature, it definitely has this really nice consistency, which is a result of the touring band playing on this album, which hasn't been done since Pretzel Logic. Starting with The Last Mall, I mean, it works as an opener considering it kind of tackles these themes of aging and death with the Everything Must Go sort of theme, the post-apocalyptic mall lyrics. Sound-wise, it's kind of just lounge music. It's kind of plain, except the Walter solo, rockin' and rollin'. Last Mall, as a whole, it's alright. Works as an opener. Not the best song ever written. Not the worst song ever written. It's alright. It's going in mid-tier. I think I'll put this, maybe next to Chain Lightning. Yeah, there you go. Things I Miss the Most. This is one of the best tracks on this album. This song tackles more of that aging theme that just runs throughout this entire album. You know, this guy's going through a divorce and he's reminiscing on married life and thinking about what comes next. I've heard this one be called a list song, which just really isn't true at all, considering that the only time when that happens is in the chorus. What really makes this song shine is the instrumentals. This song is really smooth. Love the horn section, keyboards, especially the piano. Definitely a highlight of this song would be Walter Becker's guitar playing. Pretty much throughout this entire album, Walter Becker does the lead guitar. It's phenomenal in contributing to that sort of soft rock jazz type sound that is just consistent throughout the entire album, especially on this song, particularly the closing guitar solo. I really love that closing guitar solo. Definitely a top tier song, but I think I'll put this above like Black Cow for right now. Blues Beach. This song isn't the best on the album, but at the same time, it's still very enjoyable. The title matches the song itself perfectly, since it's this sort of like really fun, groovy, yet pretty sad, pathetic song about a loser. Sound-wise, it's great. It's really groovy, really funky. Like a lot of this album, there's a lot of just really quotable lyrics. Like in this one has one of my favorite Steely Dan lyrics of all time. We could rent a paranymphic glider, my hypothetical friend. It's just so quirky. Steely Dan is quirky. Anyway, throughout the entire album, and especially on this song, the backing vocalists do an incredible job, especially the two touring band members that appear on this album, Catherine Russell and Carolyn Leonhardt. They're really good backing vocalists. As much as I like Blues Beach, it's definitely not the highlight of the album, considering how instrumentally barren it is compared to the rest. It's definitely a high tier song though. I think I'll put this one like there. Yeah, I'll move some stuff around before we end, but anyway, let's continue. Godwhacker. A lot of people who don't like Everything Must Go say that this is the best song on the album. I don't agree, but I understand where they're coming from, because this is a really good song. Lyrically, the song has that trademark Steely Dan cynicism in that it rags on religion, but also has a lot of quirkiness thrown in, considering it's about assassins going to heaven to kill God. The idea for the song came about after Donald Fagen's mother passed away from Alzheimer's, with the general premise being that if the deity actually existed, what sane person wouldn't consider this to be justifiable homicide? Again, this song has very quotable and funny lyrics, especially with the line, "We track your almighty ass through 7 heaven worlds, me, Slinky Redfoot, and our trusty angel girls." So I've probably spent a good 90 seconds talking about how good the lyrics are, but the music, definitely nothing to scoff at. It's incredible, right? You got the incredible rhythm guitar throughout the entire song, and the real highlight of this is a crazy Donald Fagen synth solo followed by a crazier Walter Becker solo. For sure a moment when Steely Dan went beast mode. I think I'll put this above Throwback the Little Ones for right now, but that is subject to change. Slang of Ages. This like, there we go. Slang of Ages. All right, Slang of Ages. Walter Becker. All right, Walter Becker. What do I say about Slang of Ages other than Walter? I just wrote Walter in the notes. Honestly, I'm not really exaggerating where I put it. Maybe I'll move it later, maybe not, but this is one of their best songs. Slang of Ages is a perfect example of Steely Dan. Musically, it's quite goofy, especially with the sound effects at the beginning, but at the same time, it still exemplifies that sort of bluesy jazz rock that Steely Dan is known for. Slang of Ages also exhibits Steely Dan's masterful production, especially with the mixing on the percussion and drums. The drums hit super hard, and they have a lot of impact. Lyrically, it touches upon that overarching theme of aging I was talking about, but here, rather than being existential or really far out there, it's just really nonchalant and goofy. It's like Hey 19, except instead of using drugs and alcohol to pick up younger women, the narrator tries using young people slang, and hilarity ensues. This is the one Steely Dan song where Walter Becker takes the lead vocals, and he doesn't really sing the song like he would on his solo albums, rather he kinda raps it, which makes it even better. It doesn't really seem like they were taking themselves seriously, especially with lines like, "Let's roll with the homies, knock on wood," or "Damn, she skipped dimensions." But that's the point. That's the beauty of Slang of Ages. It's a stupid, goofy song that knows what it is. I like this one a lot, alright? It's near to me, it's dear to me, it's the only Steely Dan song I have liked on Spotify. It's just Slang of Ages. Like, there's really nothing wrong with it other than the fact that Becker's vocals have a bit of pitch correction in the chorus, but that's like unnoticeable unless you're just listening to the isolated middle channel of the 5.1 mix. But anyway, Slang of Ages for sure is a top tier Steely Dan song. It just represents what Steely Dan is all about. Strange, far out, maybe even stupid concepts turned into so much more by perfect music and masterful production. It's very ironic, and that's what Steely Dan is. Ironic. Slang of Ages, it's an ironic masterpiece. Unlike Green Book. Green Book is not my favorite song. Of course, there are parts of this song I do like. It's a very atmospheric song. It gives off seedy nighttime on the town vibes. I guess it kind of fits well because this song is about VR porn. Really great solos all around, but it's both longer than it needs to be, and it feels longer than it is. I mean, longer Steely Dan songs are always good, but at the same time, Green Book doesn't really do anything with that. It doesn't really go anywhere, even with the really nice solos. Probably the worst song on this album, because at least The Last Mall is kind of short, but you know, it's still pretty good. Definitely like the song more than like, say, anything from You Gotta Walk It. Like, as a whole, Green Book is just pretty good. I think I'll put this one like here. Alright. Pixeline. If this video was being made like a year ago, this would definitely be at the bottom. I used to really hate this song, but now, I think it's really good. Really great guitar work. Funny lyrics about pitching a cheesy movie, which give off, you know, this sort of god dang younger generation vibes. It not only adds on to the funny, but it kind of coincides with that overarching theme I was talking about. It also has this really nice sax solo, horn section as a whole, just really nice horns. Even with the good instrumentals, this song is very vocal heavy, with Carolyn Leonhardt really taking the spotlight here. She's really good on this song. However, Donald, not as good considering his aging vocals don't really help him here. I mean, sure, I have said that Donald's aging vocals aren't really a problem, but they don't really do him any favors either, especially when he hits the high notes. Overall, it's really good. I like the song a lot. It's gonna go in like A tier. Maybe like above Blues Beach. Lunch with Gina. This song is a perfect display of post-2000 Steely Dan jazz rock. Sound-wise, it's very hectic and fun, especially with the synth line, which is done by Donald Fagen, and he has this like crazy synth solo. Like, he's just a really good player, alright? The interesting instrument choice and the fun, fast pace really work well with the lyrics about this guy running all around town trying to escape his crazy stalker, which are ambiguous enough to make you think that maybe the real stalker is the narrator. It's just a really fun song. That's what I love about Everything Must Go as a whole. It's just a really fun album, whether it intends to be or not. Alright, back to the lyrics. Like a lot of other Steely Dan songs, this one has a bit of name dropping too, but at the same time, it also leans more towards pop culture references. Like, I peel it like the Flash, I don't mean boo to her. And perhaps a reference to the violent video game series Postal, with the line, "I'm about to go postal," when she waltzes in. And the song basically ends with a double entendre, "The waiter never comes, God knows the service could be better." Like Slang of Ages, it's just a really fun, goofy song. Lunch with Gina definitely sits among the best Steely Dan songs. It's just really good. And finally, the title track, Everything Must Go. It's a very fitting close to the Steely Dan story, as cheesy as that sounds. First off, the sax intro, played by Walt Weiskopf. It's like a bomb going off, and the rest of the song is so low-key, it's like the cleanup crew. Like Blues Beach, it's a song that fits the title perfectly. It's so low-key and somber, yet it feels like One last hurrah. Fittingly, the lyrics are about a business, well, going out of business, which are really funny yet melancholic, but at the same time reflective and a bit optimistic at points. Everything Must Go is a perfect ending to Steely Dan. I really couldn't imagine it any other way. I think I'll put this one like there. So before we get to the final ranking, I think I'm gonna move some things around because while I am happy with most of these placements, some of it just seems really off. So here is the final, not really definitive ranking. So what I'm going to do now is list all the songs starting from the bottom. But before I do that, I want to thank you all for watching up to this point. Unless you skipped to this point, then I thank you for skipping to this point of the video. I also want to thank you all for being so patient with me for this one. I know this took almost 4 months to make, but I hope at least it was worth the wait, even if it kind of sucks. But anyway, I also want to say that this isn't really a definitive ranking because my opinion changes on a regular basis. And on top of that, this is just a very subjective topic. Feel free to agree or disagree with my garbage takes in the comments below. One last thing. I'd like to thank all my viewers and subscribers for just being here, you know? I know I don't express it that much, but I genuinely appreciate all the support, the comments, and all that stuff. So I just wanted to spend a little bit saying thank you so much. I hope you're all doing well, and I hope that this video wasn't that much of a disappointment. So with all that out the way, here is the final ranking from worst to best. Starting with War and Peace, If It Rains, You Gotta Walk It Like You Talk It Reprise, FM Reprise, Berrytown, Dirty Work, You Gotta Walk It Like You Talk It, Red Giant White Dwarf, Flotsam and Jetsam, Roll Back the Meaning, With a Gun, Sail the Waterway, Dallas, Monkey in Your Soul, Change of the Guard, Rose Darling, Cousin Dupree, Dog Eat Dog, Any Major Dude Will Tell You, Through with Buzz, East St. Louis Toodaloo, Turn That Heartbeat Over Again, Green Book, The Last Mall, Chain Lightning, Brooklyn Knows the Charmer Under Me, Pearl of the Quarter, Reelin' in the Years, Ricky Don't Lose That Number, Any World That I'm Welcome to, Charlie Freak, Kings, FM, Parker's Band, Your Gold Teeth, Razor Boy, Don't Take Me Alive, Sign In Stranger, Haitian Divorce, Cash Only Island, West Side Story, Here at the Western World, Black Friday, Everyone's Gone to the Movies, Daddy Don't Live in That New York City No More, Do It Again, Bodhisattva, The Royal Scam, Showbiz Kids, The Boston Rag, Janie Runaway, Your Gold Teeth 2, Blues Beach, Pixeline, Josie, What a Shame About Me, Gaslighting Abby, Hey 19, Peg, Third World Man, The Steely Dan Show, Fire in the Hole, Only a Fool Would Say That, Midnight Cruiser, Babylon Sisters, Pretzel Logic, Night by Night, Black Cow, Things I Miss the Most, Everything Must Go, King of the World, The Fez, The Caves of Altamira, Throw Back the Little Ones, Green Earrings, Godwhacker, Home at Last, My Rival, Glamour Profession, Bad Sneakers, This All Too Mobile Home, My Old School, I Got the News, Everything You Did, Dr. Wu, Kid Charlemagne, Negative Girl, Asia, Two Against Nature, Slang of Ages, Jack of Speed, West of Hollywood, Lunch with Gina, Almost Gothic, Time Out of Mind, Gaucho, and finally, the best Steely Dan song, in my opinion, Deacon Blues. So yeah, that's it. You can stop watching now. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you again in the next one.
You're not gonna get away with it. I'm gonna make your life hell.